So what we'll do is I'm going to interview Brad a little bit about his background, and then I'll ask him some questions that prompt him to tell the story about transformation within leader construction, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. So be thinking of questions.
This is going to be interesting having two truth detectors in the room.
Yes.
I can't make stuff up.
I'm already thinking of questions to ask them.
Yeah, the post meeting.
Yeah.
So what do you
Oh
say?
no, during the meeting, no.
Yeah.
So
Let's see here.
so where are you from, Brad?
Originally from Omaha, Nebraska. Grew up here. Born in Lincoln. Grew up in Omaha. Went to Burke High School here. Went down to school down in Lincoln, then engineering school. Got my construction management degree there.
So does anything stand out as a person or an event that occurred that was particularly shaping of you prior to going to college in your earlier years?
Oh, my dad was in the construction. He was in the construction sales. He sold materials.
Okay.
So I was always around the construction industry and just always found it fascinating. And I mean, as a kid, I was, I think my favorite toy was my erector set, and I was always building forts and that kind of stuff. So it was just kind of something that I always enjoyed. It was always a sense of completion and a sense of accomplishment when something was done. And so that's just kind of how I was wired and really enjoyed that. I originally was going to go to school to be an architect. And at the time, this will give you a little bit of perspective, in 1978, graduating architects were making $11,000.
I don't think much has changed.
Yeah, not a lot. So that was one of the things that got my interest in the construction management program. Was a relatively new program down at the university, and a gentleman from the Contractors Association introduced me to that program, and really that sparked, and that was a much better fit for me.
So your undergrad is in?
Construction management engineering.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
construction management and engineering.
Yep.
So when you were in those formative years, was there anything that you feel kind of stood out as your strengths and what you knew this is what I'm good at that time? I don't know if I've asked you that before.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think you have. Always enjoyed being around people. Always enjoyed, doing group events and working with groups of people, and that's really a lot of what we do. I mean, what we, the job that particularly the project managers do is not pounding nails and pouring concrete. What they do is assemble people and assemble teams towards a common outcome. And I was part of different groups in high school and college, and that was always kind of a sense of satisfaction also, that to see a group work towards a common outcome.
Were you an athlete at all?
No, I played soccer in high school.
Okay.
But,
Wow, that was when soccer wasn't cool.
It was a club sport.
That was
You're right. It was for guys who couldn't play football.
But who could run for 90 minutes,
Yeah.
So, interesting.
Yeah,
So,
that was a long time ago.
so early on you had this, because you described the erector set
Mm-hmm.
value. So you like putting things together, and you said, and seeing it done.
Yeah.
So this sense of getting something done. And then you're also talking about this sense of bringing people together to accomplish something. And those were two themes early on.
Yep, yeah. And really, as later on in life, the latter really replaced the former, and I really realized that building buildings was a cool thing, but it was really the accomplishment of pulling people together. That was really the more satisfying, building those relationships and seeing people again work towards a common outcome was really satisfying.
So, out of college, were you married out of college?
I was married in college.
You
I
were
was
married in college?
junior in college, and married. I got married, and so that put me on that sounds negative, but I was on the 5.5-year plan because I was working full time.
Yeah.
Going to school full time, and so yeah, we lived in Lincoln, finished my degree, worked in Lincoln for about another year, and then we took a job in Arizona. We moved to Phoenix. We were in Phoenix for 6 years, and then a little recession came along in '89, and that kind of shut things down there, and we moved to Northern Virginia area, south of DC.
What were you doing in Arizona?
Worked for a contractor as a project manager.
As a project manager for a contractor.
Yeah.
And what
Same
brought you
thing.
to the East Coast?
Same thing.
Okay.
They had work. And what brought me to the East Coast is they had work. There was work out there, and the work was pretty well dried up in Phoenix. So
And did you have a family at this point?
When we moved to, we had 3 kids in Arizona, and then we had one more in Virginia.
And you have an interesting story about your growing family.
Oh yeah, but yeah. Our 2 oldest are adopted. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah. 2 oldest are adopted because we were told we couldn't. It was doubtful we were going to have children, and they were. Let me think. They were 9 months old when we got pregnant. So we had 3 kids in 17 months. 3 kids in diapers, and then we decided, well, as long as we're here, let's get the 4th one done. So we had 4 kids in 4 years. So less than 4 years.
How did?
We kind of went through all the phases all at one time.
Right.
Yeah.
When you spent time, where were you again on the East Coast?
We're in Fredericksburg, Virginia.
Fredericksburg.
South of DC.
Okay, and how long were you there?
Almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years.
Yeah. The recession that we had left in Arizona kind of worked its way across the country, and work started to slow down in the East Coast also. So it was not a place where we were real happy, and decided that now we had 4 kids, and all the grandmas and grandpas and family were back in the Omaha area. So we kind of said, hey, if we're gonna starve, we may as well just at least go home and starve with family. So figured out. We came back here, came back and touched base with a handful of contractors, and then it was probably about 90 days later I got a call from the gentleman that was in your role here at Leader in 1991, and said that they had somebody that had left, that had resigned, and they wanted to fill a position.
So there's a bunch of research out there that talks about how leaders, one of the things that develops leaders are these hard times. They're referred to as crucibles, and you either lean into those crucibles and you develop as a leader, and they can be a crisis, a financial crisis, a health crisis, something else. They can be conflict with individuals, or they can be having the rug pulled out from under you, kind of being left in no man's land, which sometimes is what these economic challenges can be.
Absolutely.
What happened during that season where the economy is taking a turn? You've got a young family. You've got some values that shape your role as a father and a spouse. Have you reflected on that season at all?
Oh, yeah.
Kind of choosing to come here. What did you learn during that time?
Well, you learn where your priorities are, and of course your priorities at that point. I mean, we made the decision our priority was our family, and in the I can't remember what you call the hierarchy, but feeding your family is pretty high up on the list.
That's the foundation.
So, yeah. Food, shelter, and clothing.
You'll give up your home to feed your. You live in a car.
Yeah.
To be able to feed your family.
You do what you need to do, and you go where you need to go. And we didn't want to leave Phoenix and go to Virginia, but there was a person there that offered me a job, and so we said, okay, we'll go. And thankfully, my wife was on board with that. She understood the priorities, and she understood the need to sacrifice to things that we were comfortable with in order to preserve the family and provide a growth for our family and growth opportunities for my career. And so that was a big deal, and that's and I'm not gonna. I hate talking about the way things used to be and the way things are today, but that's a concept that's not as common today, and that is sacrificing your one person's career ideals or aspirations for the better good of the family, and that's I see a lot more friction in that today, particularly, and I see it come, and I'm not talking to you guys, but I see it from in our employees where an employee might have an opportunity to do something, and the consideration of the spouse is much higher than it was 20, 30 years ago. Some of that's good, some of it's not good. The part that's not good is not the inability, but maybe the challenge of sacrificing for the greater good of the family and for the career the part that's good is there's a much better work-life balance today than there was 30, 40 years ago. So, so there's definitely a trade-off there.
Well, and there's a relationship between somebody who's learned how to sacrifice for their family. That individual will understand what it's like to sacrifice for a team and organization's
Sure.
success. So there's actually a common
Right.
a value or behavior.
Right.
So one who can articulate that can likely articulate what it means to sacrifice, whatever that might be
Right.
for a team or organization's success. So you come back to Omaha and what happened?
Well, work was kind of slow here too. But I had a job, and no, so I'm very, very thankful to come back and have a job. And again, we lived in we purchased a very modest home, and we're growing a young family, and very grateful the gentleman that I came to work for here, who retired some 10 years ago now. He and I struck a deal very early on about the prioritization of my family. And I've shared this with you before, that actually when we were going through the interview process and it had reached the decision to, he offered me the job and I had accepted. So we're working through some of the details, and one of the things that I shared with him, just kind of as a matter of clarification, that I just shared with him the fact that I had these 4 young kids at home. And I said, that's one element of it. The other element of it is my wife is by 5 o'clock in the afternoon, there's not only 4 kids with their nose pressed to the glass waiting for me to pull up the driveway, but hers is too. In fact, hers is probably first. Like, are you coming home? So one of the things I shared with him was that I would do whatever I took to get my work done, whatever hours it took, whether it's evenings, mornings, whatever. But I needed to be able to walk out the door at 5 o'clock. Because that was very important to keeping my family solid and keeping everybody happy. So I would quite often I would either come in early. I mean, it wasn't unusual that I would be at the office at 5:30 or 6 in the morning, or I would take work home in the evening, because kids would go to bed at 8:30, and it was very common that I would have plans unrolled on the kitchen table after they went to bed and doing work. And so he was agreeable with that, and that's something that I've tried to carry forward with our people. So that was kind of which again today is not terribly unusual, but we didn't even know the term flex time at that point. That wasn't even a common term, but just giving employees the flexibility to say, hey, here's the expectation of your work, and here's the expectation of the quality of your work and the commitment that it will take to get that work done. How you get it done is up to you, and when you get it done is up to you. That's a little challenging, because when you, as a leader, when you're, if I come in at 6:30, it's kind of natural to look around and say, hey, nobody else is here, and I'm a late day guy, so I would typically come in early and leave, usually at the end of the day. Some people prefer to stay later, so I'm sure it's the same for them. It's like, hey, I'm working later, and nobody else is gone, but again, as long as you have clarity around what the expectation is for the work product and the work volume, really giving people the freedom of how to do it and when to do it is a great thing, I think.
So that requires trust. And as a leader, how's that formed? Because a lot of individuals will, when they're reflecting, they'll write about how difficult it is to delegate, because they know that if they do it, it's faster and it's the way they want it. Learning how to delegate is something that takes time. How is your trusting form?
The thing that it requires before trust is clarity around the expectation. So if I have given clarity around what the expectation is, then yes, there's an element of trust to see that the work gets done. But if there's clarity around the expectation, there should also be clarity around measuring that expectation. And that's probably, looking back over the years, that's probably the one that we've had the biggest challenge with. It's really hard to measure productivity in a lot of different roles. So it's easy if we get to the end of a project, we either made money or lost money, and we know where we started, and sometimes it gets better, sometimes it gets worse, and so that's pretty easy yardstick, but that never ever tells the whole story. But the first thing, like I said before, the trust is making sure that people have an accurate expectation of what do you do, what do you anticipate their work product to be.
And that's the role of the leader,
Yeah.
to be clear.
Yeah.
So if you look at engagement surveys, the two foundational needs of employees are to have clear expectations, and then the second one is I've got the resources I need to do my job.
Mm-hmm.
And if those things aren't there, then it's difficult to focus on any kind of productivity or focus on people. People need to know what's expected of them,
Right.
and they gotta have the resources to do their job. So, tell us the story. You started with leader as
Project
manager again. How old are you?
That would have been 1991, so 41.
You're 41 years old.
No, I was 31.
31?
I was born in 1960.
Yeah, because you had a big milestone
I
at
was
40.
31,
So you're
yeah,
31
yeah,
years old.
yeah.
How old were you, dear?
34.
So close to your age, okay?
Yeah.
And so, talk about your journey, because you did, in 9 years, there was a big milestone that you
Yeah.
moved towards,
So again, started as a project manager, took on, over a period of years, took on additional responsibilities where I could. The gentleman that I reported to was not a, he was a good project manager, and so like a lot of organizations, if you're a really good car salesman, somehow you end up being the new car sales manager. Well, that was kind of what happened here, which he was not a good manager. He was a good project manager, so he was not being effective in his role. So I began taking on different elements of his role, not in a let me drive you out of your seat way, but in a this is just there were glaring gaps that needed to be filled. So what that ended up resulting in was me taking his seat. But so I ended up I was named a vice president. I don't remember the year. It would have been about 96 or 97. And then I was named president in 2000. And the current president and the majority owner took the CEO role, so he advanced me to that role.
And at what point did you begin to have ownership in the company?
I had been buying stock in small. We have a stock purchase program, so I've been buying very small, handful of shares per year up to that point. But when I got to that point, then I started buying some bigger pieces of stock. So again, took the presidency in 2000, and then worked on that ownership transition. And as most of you would understand, there's leadership succession and there's ownership succession, and those are two very different things. And so we got the leadership succession piece was in progress or had taken place, and then we started working on the ownership succession. So I started buying larger chunks of stock and going to the bank and borrowing huge sums of money.
So why was it important around the year 2000 that you become president of the organization? Because there were some interesting personal goals that you had within that as well.
Lead me specifically.
Lead you
Where you're
specifically?
going there. Yeah.
Well, there's an organization you want to follow.
Yeah, okay, right. So my predecessor was part of YPO, which is Young President's Organization, and in order to qualify for that, you need to be named president by the time you're 40, and that was the year I turned 40. So it had been a very valuable thing for him to be a part of, and he wanted me to be a part of that. So it was important that I be named, that I qualify for that. So that was part of the. Without that external, it probably would have been a couple of years later. Would be my guess that advancement would have happened, but I'm thankful that it did, because the organization has been really pivotal in my development, my growth, and relationships with other peers, and the ability to lean into really smart, talented, connected people to help you run your business.
So in the year of your 40th birthday, what was Leader like when you became president? Talk about the culture and the things that you were priorities for what you were going to address in the culture.
It wasn't bad, particularly for the time. Again, it had a good, the way that it would have been self-described as a good family atmosphere, and people liked each other, and we were very proud of our longevity of employees. And that was probably one of the things that bothered me as much as anything, because we had become more proud of the tenure of our people than we were of the talent of our people. The other thing that was a real challenge at that point is we had a very large divide between our field staff and our office staff. The field versus office friction was very real and very non-productive. Not to the point of sabotage or anything of that nature, but certainly not. It was not at a place where the two were working together to increase productivity and increase profitability. So those were really the two things that were my drivers, were tearing down the wall between the office and the field, and changing us from a tenured mentality to a performance-based mentality. And the way that manifested was, I ended up, over a period of probably 4 years, we probably released 6 or 8 different employees that had been with us for a very long time. And several that had been 25, 30-year employees that had just gotten to a place where they were very entrenched in their mindsets and not interested in the overall growth of the company, and really became non-productive and became an obstructionist to where we were trying to go.
You described that period of time as lacking a leadership model and having a culture that was based on being proud of how old you were,
Right.
but not knowing who you were
Yeah.
as an organization. And you've talked about a need to change the level of transparency in the organization. And so there's some things you did to help build your credibility and being trusted as the new president.
Yeah, so we really tried to increase just the transparency around everything that we were doing. That was a big thing. Anytime we had an opportunity to be more transparent about whether it was profitability or workload or backlog, anything that we could do to share information. And one of the ways that we did that was we started having events where all of the company, all the employees were together. And this will probably kind of blow your minds a little bit, but for the first 10 years that I was here, our company Christmas party was office only. We didn't have the field staff. Now, how would that make you feel as a field employee? It certainly would make you feel valued. So, anybody that was saying, gee, I don't understand why we have this wall between the office and the field. Well, because at least once a year we build it really, really high. And we tell these people that we basically don't trust them to, and that was truly the mindset. Well, gosh, if we have the field staff there and there's alcohol, there's going to be problems and fights and all that. Well, we have quality people. We had quality people at that time. We have quality people today. And so that was one of the first things that I did was to begin different events. We started having all company meetings where everyone would come together and we'd do a state of the company address and share. Again, people didn't even know how we did last year. The only way that they knew that if we made money is if they got a bonus, and they didn't know how the bonus was calculated or why it came or anything else. But I mean, there was one year, and I think I've shared this with you before, that one of the years that things really kind of came to a head. This was before I was named president. Was the bonus ended, fiscal year ended, and the audit was done, and nothing was said about bonuses. And finally, after about 5 weeks, I went into my boss's office and I said, "Hey, what's going on? Nothing's been said about this." He said, "Well, we didn't make any money last year, and we had a bad year, and so we're not paying bonuses." Well, that would have been nice to know, So those were the kinds of things that I was pretty determined to say, we've got to be more transparent about this, and if we want people all pulling the same direction, they need to have all the same information. And that really, really became important. I'm fast forwarding a little bit, but during the recession, the big recession, 08 and 09, we went buck naked on information. It was, we just had to have everybody pulling in the same direction, and it was kind of interesting. Some of the all-company meetings we'd have, if things are going good, I'd be up, kind of talking about what's going on. There'd be a few people that were, kind of back pew at church, kind of half paying attention or nodding off. And boy, during the recession, they were all locked on. It was all eyes on, because everybody was, what's the clue? What's he going to say? What's the clue that I'm going to lose my job next month? What's the clue? What am I going to hear that's going to either make me feel better about going forward, or concerned about my future. So that was a big deal, just getting people on the same page, sharing the same level of information, showing an equivalent respect to everybody regardless of their job, regardless of their role. And that began to tear down those walls. It increased trust, it increased engagement. And these are the little joys of being in a leadership role. When you start hearing your people repeat things that you've said to other people, it's like, oh my gosh, they're listening, and they're engaged. So those kinds of things, were really important, and we've continued those, and we've ramped everything I just talked about. We continue to ramp up every year that goes by, and so now we have quarterly all-company meetings instead of just annual all-company meetings. We probably have, 4 or 5 different social events throughout the year. We used to have just a Christmas party, now we have a summer party, and we got different outings. And again, this is all kind of normal now. For a lot of companies, you hear, well, that's just what everybody does now, or what a lot of companies do now, but that wasn't the case. So doing those things to again increase relationships. If a guy in the field that pounds nails, if he doesn't know Derek, he's not going to care about whether he's taking care of his family or not, and vice versa. But if you know somebody, you're engaged in them, and you've got a level of commitment to their success too.
And you have an interesting, how many actual leader employees are there?
We're about 85 right now.
85? And
I
then
know every Monday somebody says we've hired somebody new, so I don't know what.
and then if you
We hired
add
2 new this week.
if
So-
you add the subs,
hundreds, maybe thousands, yeah. If you add in the subcontractors and their employees, people that we're managing and having contact with, yeah.
so do you keep, is there any intentionality in building those relationships?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, in fact, we hold events for we call them stakeholders, because there might be subcontractors or suppliers or architects or engineers. They all have a stake in our success, and we have a stake in their success. So we have a number of different events throughout the year. We had an architects event here a month or so ago, and we've had, I don't know how frequently the subcontractor events are, maybe quarterly.
Yeah, quarterly.
Yeah, and because they are a huge part of our success. If we have a bad team of subcontractors, we will not succeed. And so, number one, we want them engaged on when we're putting our pricing together, because we want favorable pricing from them, because we don't win work unless we have good pricing. So we want to engage from that aspect, but then also during the course of the work, we want to make sure that we get favoritism from them as far as crews and foremen and quality of people. And those are all the things that will make us successful or fail.
So you talk about four iterations of C changes in the organization that are connected to vision and values, strategic planning, and your role and how you've approached each one of those has been a little bit different. Can you speak to those?
Yeah, the first was, goes back to, in fact, I made some notes. First goes back to 2003. Yeah, any notes. And that was when I discovered the book Good to Great. And I don't know if everybody's read that book. If you haven't, make a point to read it. It's a little bit outdated now because some of the firms that they considered great firms are now out of business.
And there's a subsequent book called How the Mighty Fall.
Yeah.
That is about those who didn't make it through that.
And why.
Yeah.
And the why is really the important thing there. So we did a book study on Good to Great, and really it was we understood that we were a good company, but we knew we weren't a great company. And so, okay, how many of these concepts can we adopt? So we did a book study on that. We had about, 12 or 14, key people that volunteered, and it wasn't mandatory, to be a part of that book study. So we went chapter by chapter for, 8-10 weeks, and really kind of tore it apart and said, what makes a great company, and what are we not doing that we need to do? So that really kind of helped us develop our first strategic plan, which was really not a strategic plan, but I now liken it more to a list of really good things that we need to do to make ourselves better, which is one form of strategic planning. And I talked to a friend at that time about strategic planning, and one of the things that she shared with me is she said there's really two ways to do it. You can pick a destination, like a roadmap. I want to go to X, and then figure out how to get there, or you can just say I'm going to do a lot of good things that are going to take me to a better place. So our first iteration of strategic planning was really that latter one. We're going to do a lot of good things that we know are going to make us better. So that's what we did. And that was, like I said, that was 2003. And then the next big impact was during the recession, and that was 2008, 2009. And then the third one was when I did the painted picture exercise, which was 2012. 2012. And that was really that exercise came out of a book that I read called Double Double, and it was by a gentleman by the name of Cameron Harold. And it was interesting. It was really just a small part of the book, but it was the part that really connected with me. And what he suggested was that you sit down and spend some time writing out what your company would look like if everything was operating perfectly. And you take all the cost elements out of the way, geography out of the way, time out of the way. Just say, if we were doing project management perfectly, what would it look like? If we were doing estimating perfectly, what would it look like? So I sat down and I started. I actually, went to the public library for 2 days and just kind of locked myself in a study room and worked on this, and broke it down into 8 or 10 different areas. IT and personnel and HR and accounting and business development, and pulled it all together and just said, what would all of these things look like? And so that became our destination point. And now, that was an interesting exercise, but the real rubber hit the road when I shared it. Because I had to share. I thought, okay, I can't, if I write this up and I bottle it up and I put it in my office, what good is it going to do? So the real, and it was it's kind of the term I use, it was kind of a buck naked moment. But at the all company meeting, when I handed this out to 60 some people and said, here's where we're going, and they're leafing through it like, I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know if that's going to happen. So it was really a challenge, because to again make that commitment in front of everybody and say, here's where we are going. But it's one of my proudest moments in that people said, okay, if that's where you said we're going, let's go. And people got behind it. And so then our strategic planning became, what do we need to do to get there?
So you had your endpoint. So I'm curious, because this is, you part of your core as a leader is a very collaborative approach to work. And the initial attempt at strategic planning was, hey, let's all get together, read this book, and let's figure out what we're going to do. This was very different, because this was you, and where'd you work on this?
In the library.
In the public library. So you went and found a cubicle in the public library and cranked it out. Would you read the quote that you have here on the bottom, because this is what you communicated.
It says, welcome to my view of 2015, and again, I issued this in May of 2012. The following painted picture is written as if it is 3 years from today, and I am describing the company as it exists at that time. As you will see, we've made a lot of progress. I'm excited to share our joint destination and look forward to taking this ride with you all.
And so the sections that you described as envisioning were about your culture, values, brand, and image, the staff, marketing, public relations, sales, operations, IT, finance, communication, facilities, and then the back page was about Brad. So talk about why that was important to you, because that's different than all the others. So
and this was probably that was the hardest thing to share, because it was very personal.
This is your ideal future.
Yeah. But it needed to be shared, because people needed to understand that for us to get to where we needed to be, I needed to grow too. And this was really a glimpse. This was probably the deepest glimpse into me as a person, and what I value, and why, and what things were important to me, and why we were doing what we were doing. This was probably the why. More than everything else was the what. This was probably the why. And you know, it was interesting. I had people ask me some questions about that. Not a lot, but I think most people knew a lot of what I shared in there about me already. But again, it was definitely a deeper glimpse, and that was hard to share.
So you wrote things like, people like it when I'm around, but don't need me to make decisions for them. I don't need to be there on bid day except to encourage others to do well. Was that dramatically different than what you were doing at the time?
Yeah, yeah.
You said, I wake up every morning and I can't believe the opportunities I've been given and the fun that I'm having. It doesn't register that this level of success is happening to me. I'm working less, playing more, and earning more. I'm evaluating my roles in church, government, and the community to see where I'm being led to serve. I'm seeking the Lord and where He wants to use me. Others are in leadership roles and growing in those roles. Their growth comes from an attitude of continuous improvement, both personal and professional, and possibly due to my stepping aside, not down. So this was your kind of catalytic document for saying, here's where I'm accountable for my
Right.
growth. You also include a 4-week vacation, and there's a lot of stuff in there that are about his personal life. I'll pass this around if you guys want to take a look. You used to have a stack of them in your office. Do you?
Yeah, I used to have them up front at the front desk, and that was another thing that was interesting. Shared. Okay, do you share this with the community? And at first I was like, well, gosh, what if that's our secret sauce? What if somebody else figures out the recipe? And then I got thinking, nobody's secret sauce is somebody else's secret sauce, you know? So if somebody else wanted to go through that exercise, it would have been, they would have had to have gone through that exercise. It would only be unique to whoever did it for their own company and whoever did it for themselves personally. So yeah, I kept copies of them up front, and we gave them to clients and we gave them to stakeholders, and it was an interesting reaction from people.
So what was we're on the third wave, yes?
Yeah.
So the second wave was
Second wave was really the recession.
the second wave was the recession.
Yeah.
And how do you survive through the recession? And then the third wave was double.
Yep.
And you said you're in your fourth wave of sea changes. So we're 3 years out. Wait, we're 6 years out, right? That was supposed
That took us to 2015,
Yeah.
so we're 3 years out. 6 years from
Past
from
that.
the inception. Yeah.
6 years
Yeah.
from it. Okay.
Yeah.
So
And by the way, in 2015, we had hit about between 85 and 90% of these metrics. That was the other thing that was interesting. It's each year that went by, we had to say, okay, how are we doing? Yeah, so every year at the annual meetings, like I go through and I check off, okay, we're doing well on this one and this one and this one. And we worked on this one, but it was amazing that when you set out markers for people, how eagerly they will go for them.
So what changed after this document? How did you approach strategic planning next?
Well, the most recent, we've had kind of two mini iterations of strategic planning recently, and we did one about 2 years ago, and I was a part of that, but the most recent strategic planning, the biggest issue, or the biggest change, is I haven't been a part of it. The team is doing it without me.
So your role has changed in
Yeah.
the past few years.
Yeah, a little over a year ago, I named a gentleman by the name of Greg Key as our president, and I took CEO role. And one of the things that you read in there is me not stepping down, but stepping aside and making room for other people. And that was a big part of that. And because Greg will succeed me in that role, it's important that his vision begin to supersede mine. And which I'm comfortable with, because his and mine are so closely aligned. We've not, in fact, he's been here 6 years, and I can count on one hand the number of times that he and I wanted to go at all in any different directions. So it was really a matter of giving him the room to show his leadership, and to develop a team that is gonna succeed me.
Mm.
And have not stepped down, I'm still an active part of the business, still here all the time, I have not retired, you feel free to share that with the community, because for some reason people think I've retired. What I did do is make room for Greg and for the future leaders like these guys here to develop that vision and make it their own. And again, having set the vision and the tone and the culture, I'm not nervous about where that plan will take us, because it will be within those guidelines. I'm not concerned about that.
So how has your role changed?
Well, mine has become more external. I've increased my participation in some external boards and community work and those kinds of things, and so I am less involved in day-to-day operations. There are still, whether it's issues or projects, or particularly projects where I have a relationship with an owner or an architect, or some scenario related to that project, I might be involved to a greater degree. But I'm not involved in day-to-day operations to much degree at all. Still involved in problem solving and managing issues or challenges and those kinds of things. But like I said, there have been, I don't know how many people in the last 6 or 8 weeks, how many folks we've hired, and most of them I didn't even know were happening. So it's a little interesting to sit at the end of the table and think, oh, we hired somebody, really? Tell me about that.
That's an interesting transition.
Yeah,
for
it
leaders.
is.
And it is happening at your level, but that is not dissimilar to what happens to anybody who is moving and developing leaders in succession planning. So what has been, I'm thinking, what has been easy, what has been hard, what's been surprising, as you as a leader have begun to delegate this company that you cherish, and really have been through great times and hard times, that you've shaped the DNA of the organization since you became the president. So what was easy, what was hard?
I would say trusting people is easy and hard.
Okay, talk about that.
It's easy because I know that I've got great people making those decisions, and I know that they're going to make those decisions in alignment with our culture and our goals and our vision. That part's easy. What's hard is, and this is kind of like and I don't mean this to sound condescending at all, but it's kind of like when you're a parent and you're watching your kid ride their tricycle down the street, at 100 miles an hour, you know the outcome. Or you know one possible outcome, I should say. And so, it's one of the challenging things, and I used to make fun of old people because they start getting more and more conservative in their decision making and less risk tolerance. And there's a reason for that. It's because you've seen a lot of things go bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I had I think with your last class that I shared, one of the things I shared was that I have been through 4 recessions in my career. I graduated during a recession, I moved to Arizona during a recession, I moved to Virginia during a recession, and I moved back, and then we had the big one in 2008, 2009. So I've and it's not like, you might know a grandparent or a great-grandparent that lived through the Depression, and I'm not home washing tinfoil and folding and saving it, that's not that, but it does give you a little bit more conservative mindset. So when I shared with a group of our employees probably 6 months ago, we did a session kind of on the company history, and one of the things I shared there was that it's a little, I don't want to say this with all grace, it's a little frustrating to me when I hear people complain about working very hard during good times, because like a farmer, when you're having a good year, man, you put all the hay away you can, and so that's what we're doing now, is we're working hard, and we're putting hay away in the barn, because I know that there's a drought coming. I know that there is. It's not will it happen, it's when it will happen. And I'm if that sounds doomsday, I'm sorry, but the reality is that there will be a recession, there will be a slowdown. So I'm of a mindset when there's a lot of work, you work hard and you capture as much as you can, And if that's challenging, if that's hard, if that's difficult, that's just the way it is. That's what you do. You know, and using the farmer analogy again, during harvest, they don't complain about working 16-hour days because they know they got to get the crops out of the field. So,
What was the response to that? 'Cause it's a powerful statement to make, and it
yeah,
you wouldn't have been saying it unless there
yeah.
had been some squeaking, right? So
You know, it wasn't an overwhelming, oh my gosh, you're the smartest guy in the room response, I know that. And a lot of the folks that, I mean, basically if you graduated in the last 9 to 10 years, you might remember, you know, your folks, you know, talking about, you know, or the recession happening or those kinds of things. But for people that are basically under the age of 30, I'm doing my math right, you know, they probably weren't in the workplace
they didn't
to a
feel it.
significant degree during that time. And so they didn't feel it, they didn't sense it, it didn't impact their, you know, their career or might have impacted their education or their ability to go to school, but not to the same degree as somebody that's got 3 kids at home they're trying to feed. You know, so it's a little bit different mindset. I don't even remember the original question you asked me. It took me down that path.
What did you learn?
Yeah.
What are you learning
Okay.
in learning to delegate? So
Yeah.
I have one more question, then I'm going to open it up to you guys to ask some questions so you can be thinking about that. One of the things you've talked about is really creating a clear culture shift when you became president,
Mm-hmm.
and through the various iterations of strategic planning, there's a sense of where are we going, what does it mean to, who do we want on the bus, and
Mhm.
why do we want them there? What have you identified as core competencies, core characteristics of these are the folks that really belong at Leader?
Mm-hmm. I learned to hire people around character, not skills. That's probably number one. If someone has a reasonable to high level of intelligence, I can teach them about anything. I can't teach them to be a good person. That's not an 8 to 5. You know, that's not a workplace. I can encourage good behavior, and I can model character and integrity and good behavior in the workplace. But I can't, in the workplace, it's very challenging to make somebody of poor character somebody of good character. So I really learned to hire around that as the number one criteria.
And how do you sift that out during the hiring process?
And it is really hard. I mean, we try to do, in cases where we can, we try to do multiple points of contact. We have multiple people meet and converse. I don't know if this is totally proper from an HR standpoint. We invite the spouses to come and talk with us, and that's not. I know a lot of times they think it's so we can interview them, but it's not. It's so they can interview us. But that's usually very revealing. You know, just learning about people and it doesn't take long to figure out what somebody values and what's important to them. And we haven't been right every time. For sure, we've not been right every time. But the other thing we've learned is if someone is not a good fit, you need to separate early, not late. And trying, one of the things that I was guilty of early on, I'm probably still am guilty of, is if you've got somebody that's not quite a perfect fit, you keep trying to round the edges and try and make it work. And part of that's because you're interested in them as a person, you want them to grow, and that's a big part of it. We invest a lot of time and money in people, and we want to see them grow to be better people and better employees. But you know, part of it's also the fact you don't want to admit you made a mistake. It's like, God, I'm just sure that person can do this job well if we only give them another chance. If we only give them another tool. If we only coach them a little bit more. Well, sometimes they're just not the right fit, and those are tough decisions. But you know, the saying "you never fired somebody too early," I think is probably true.
Kim Hoganine says, hire slow, fire fast. Be really intentional. And that's hard when you have a need for somebody. When you're in that survival mode, it's very hard to be patient to make sure that you've had enough.
My favorite hires, not that Derek's my favorite person, but my favorite hire, I know Derek's, I went to school with his folks.
Oh, interesting.
And your mother-in-law's mother was my first grade teacher. So I've known of Derek all of his life, and I know his wife all of her life. So those are my favorite kinds of hires. And I've got a superintendent that works for us that his wife's folks were very dear friends of my wife and my folks. And so I knew her all of my life. So those are my favorite kinds of hires. And if I know the spouse, or I know the individual, or I know the family, I'm going to know a lot about the individual and whether they're going to be a good fit or not.
Okay. So what questions do you have?
Would you say that most of your good hires have come through other connections of people that you already know?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Is that typically, like when you're thinking, oh, I have this hole to fill, like I need this certain type of person, how do you go about
Yeah,
finding them?
we do use recruiters. In fact, you came through a recruiter, if I remember right, Lance. Is that?
I came through Andy Bailey being my next door neighbor.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's right. I forgot about that. But you were working in California.
I kind of did a cold resume, sent out to the some of the contractors that are stuck in the community, and then ended up being Andy was my next door neighbor, and kind of hit it all that way.
Yeah, no, but absolutely. If we can put out feelers, that's our number one. Yeah, recruiters are. I mean, they serve a purpose. We utilize them at times, but that's not my highest comfort level at all. Number one, you have two motivated people to make the thing work: the recruiter and the candidate. And again, I don't know that we've ever really been sold a bill of goods by a recruiter, but yeah, absolutely, our favorite is if we can hire through networks of people that we know. Sometimes we'll contact subcontractors and say, who's your favorite? Who do you work with at another firm that's your favorite project manager or your favorite whatever? What I love hearing from them is sometimes I'll hear, oh, I know this guy and he would really be a good fit for your culture. I love hearing that because it means that they understand what your culture. Yeah. Yeah.
So a lesson from that that's important. The number of people who send me their resume to look at it and then they're going to submit it blindly to organizations, that most people find their great jobs by leaning into their network.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that you have to have
A network.
Right? And so the should is I'm going to mail these in. I'm going to, it used to be the paper, now it's CareerLink or whatever, that you're able to identify positions, but it's work your network. And work your network in a way where you first choose to be helpful to people before you make an ask. That makes sense. So any other questions?
I had one.
Josh.
So kind of when you're talking about hiring those longer tenured employees, just kind of in general, kind of internally and externally, how do you go about making those difficult decisions?
Through a lot of sleepless nights. Yeah, those were really, really tough. I mean, like I said, we let a couple folks go that were 25 and 30-year employees. But here's the really interesting thing. As hard as it was, after it was done, nobody was surprised. They might have been shocked when it happened, but afterward it was like, he's been saying this and this and this and this and this, and we know that this person is outside of that. So, yeah, I wonder if it's something, it was kind of like, I guess he really means what he said.
Mm-hmm.
So it was in a strange way, you would think that, let's say you're, Ford Motor Company and you lay off 3,000 people, everybody's nervous, right? In a strange way, this actually grew trust because it was like, okay, he said this is what he values, and he said this is where we're going, and this decision to let that person go is completely in alignment with that. When I took the presidency, one of the things that I told my boss, the CEO at the time, was I said I'm going to take the role. I'm thrilled. I'm excited, pleased. One of the first things I'm going to do is fire the guy in that office over there who's been here 26 years. And he looked at me. He said, "What?" And I said, he said, "He makes more money than any other project manager I know." I said, "Yeah, I know he does." And he does it on the backs of our subcontractors, and he does it on the backs of our people. And that's not what we're gonna do anymore. If you're gonna trust me, and I told him what I was gonna do. I said, if you're gonna trust me to do this, that's gonna, and not tomorrow, I need time to get it in place. And it took about 4 or 5 months to get things documented, and because one of the things I wanted to do was give clarity to that individual. Here's what's going on. Here's what we're going to do. Here's the new program. Here's how we're going to deal with people, and giving him an opportunity. In fact, it took longer than that. It's probably 6 or 8 months. In order to give him an opportunity to say, yeah, I'm on board, and he didn't get on board, so we ended up letting him go. And that was the first kind of shot across the bow, and people were like, oh crap. I guess this is for real. But again, in an interesting way, it actually created trust. It was hard.
But when there's longevity with employees and a pride in being what you had 135 years about.
We're 135 now.
135. That often facilitates an entitlement culture. And so setting boundaries, here's what's expected of you. You're here not because you're entitled to be here, but you're here because you're working towards our shared goals.
Right.
That's a great way to blow the entitlement culture up and give people the opportunity to choose to be here and work towards your goals.
Right.
So.
Yep.
Another question?
I got one. You said that you hire around character and not around skill, which is awesome. We like to do the same thing, but I'm curious, what sort of like training and learning opportunities then do you offer for your employees to help build that skill that you're looking for?
We do a number of different things. We've got an internal learning program we call Leader U, and that's around a lot of different skill sets. That might be everything from learning how to operate a piece of equipment to the program I did on the history of the company, or it might be on leadership, or I did one on etiquette one time. So it's all different things around that. But we also do external learning opportunities, and some of it's ad hoc, some of it's a little bit more deliberate. We've utilized a company that's done some leadership training for us for probably almost 20 years. And they've got a good program for entry-level managers and then senior-level managers about how to delegate and how to grow your people and time utilization and all those kinds of things. So being deliberate about picking candidates to be a part of that. But the program that we're working on right now, that I'm developing right now, is around, and we have yet to name it yet, but we're kind of calling it the Leader MBA or the Leader. I don't know. We haven't come up with a final name for it yet, but it will be a 2-year program of a series of 12 one-day sessions with candidates, and we'll have different classes. We'll probably we're thinking around 6 people per class to be a part of that, and that'll be around lots of different elements around leadership and growth. Some of them will be soft skills, more again about how do you lead, how do you grow your people, how do you delegate, how do you be transparent, communication, and then also around things that are more business related. How do I, if I'm going to grow in my position, I need to understand how to read a balance sheet and an income statement, and what's it like working with our insurance carrier and our surety company and those kinds of things. So that's a program that that I'm working on. Greg and I are working on developing, and we're hoping to kick off this fall, and it'll be 2-year cycles. So that'll be 100%. It'll be internal. It'll be an internal program, but we'll use some external resources for some of the elements of that. So some folks that will train better than we will internally.
So less than 100 employees in the construction industry, and you're creating a university that you're going to invest in your employees. That strikes me as being that's an outlier choice, I would say. So talk a little bit about.
Well, and I hate to use we call them the evil empire, Kiewit Construction.
The big guy.
Yeah, they have a program like this, and a lot of the other large companies have programs like this, and there's no reason that we couldn't do a program like this. you know, they're doing 30, 40, 50, 100 people in their classes. We'll do it smaller. Obviously, our resources are not the same, but there's no reason that we wouldn't invest
So
in people to the same degree.
you just are, when you're pursuing something, you lean into it with great intentionality.
Try to.
Yeah,
I tell you what, one thing you learn in being in a leadership role, if you announce something that you're going to do to the masses, you better do it. Because I got 85, 90 people that are going to hold me accountable. And that was one of the scariest things about that painted picture, because I knew one day somebody was going to come up to me and they say, hey, on page 4, this hasn't happened yet. And I didn't want that day to happen, so that was one of the scariest things about, you know, it's like, okay, tell everybody, hey, I'm on a diet and I want to lose 20 pounds, would you be my accountability partner? Nobody wants to do that. So
another question? Yeah.
When you wrote that, I'm curious to hear, how would you say you needed to grow in order for this to come to pass?
I did not have the self-confidence to do that 10 years prior. I barely had the self-confidence to do it when I did. But, and that's, you know, that's one of the, I'm looking around, I'm pretty sure I'm the oldest person in the room.
I think we figured out you're older than me, so yes, you are.
That is one of the few benefits of getting older. You know, there's a reason that, you know, your old man neighbor mows his yard in his black socks and his Bermuda shorts, because he doesn't care. You know? He's got enough self-confidence. He really doesn't care what you think about it. You know, and so the older you get, the more self-confidence you get, and the more and not from an arrogant standpoint, but probably a better way to say that would be a better understanding of who you are. And lack of fear in being who you are and sharing who you are. You know, sharing the faith element of that was a challenge. You know, but it wasn't a surprise to anybody. If it had been a surprise, then I wouldn't have been leading my life the way that I should have been leading my life. So, but to put it down on paper and share it with, and again, that document went to people that didn't necessarily know me personally. So. Yeah, it was a real challenge. That was a very nervous day.
And would you say before, like when you're imagining what you want your company to turn into, had you been kind of hitting a bit of a ceiling of achievement?
Yeah.
And that's why, okay, this is where I
Exactly.
want to see. What were some of your internal things that you realized that I need to grow or look at this differently so that we can press through to new levels?
You know, I think there was and we're seeing a little bit of this now, there was a hunger from people saying, where are we going? Okay, we've done some good things, we're better, we know we're poised for something. What are we poised for, and what does that look like? Where is it? So in a way, giving people a destination was probably a little bit a point of relief. And it's like, all right, okay, we know we've been getting ready. You know, it's like, you know, if you're, you know, there's reason you send, you know, Army recruits to boot camp for 10 weeks and you don't leave them there for 2 years. You know, you get them trained up and you get them ready to go and then you deploy them. Well, if you keep people in boot camp for a long time, then that's not going to be a satisfying place to be. So we'd kind of gone through the boot camp and we had learned, you know, we had improved and we had processes in place that people understood were going to take us to a different place. So they were ready to be deployed to where that was going to be. Does that make sense?